The dining room glowed under the warm lights, the oak table covered with a white cloth, and the roasted beef I had spent the whole afternoon preparing still filled the room with its rich aroma. But the atmosphere was different this time. Mark, my son, kept glancing at the phone beside his plate. My daughter-in-law, Jennifer, was looking around the room as if she were assessing the furniture's value. And my granddaughter, Emily, was fixated on her piece of bread, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I forced a smile, trying to keep things pleasant, then gently placed a piece of beef on Emily's plate. Emily looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Grandma." Just as I reached out to pat her head, Jennifer quickly cut in, her tone stiff, clearly annoyed. "Oh, Mom, please don't give her so much. Kids these days need to eat healthy. Too much red meat isn't good for them?" Before I could respond, Mr. George, our longtime neighbor, let out a hearty chuckle, breaking the awkward silence. One slice of Helen's roast beef never hurt anyone. Everyone in the neighborhood knows how good it is. I nodded slightly, grateful to Mr. George, but the tension in Mark's eyes didn't go away. I had a feeling something was coming, and a mother's intuition is never wrong. Mark suddenly set down his knife and fork. The soft clink rang sharp in the silent room. "Mom, I've got a major audit next week from headquarters. The pressure's really intense." I nodded, keeping my voice gentle and supportive. "It'll be okay, son. I'm always here for you." Jennifer jumped in immediately, quick and decisive, as if rehearsed. "Mark needs a completely quiet place to focus. His workload is overwhelming right now. We need a space that supports that." A chill started to crawl up my spine. Mark didn't beat around the bush anymore. He looked straight at me, his eyes cold, his voice direct and cutting. "So, I think your upstairs master room is the best option. Would you mind moving down to the living room on the first floor? Jennifer needs a quiet space to rest and unwind." I was stunned. The fork in my hand froze mid-air. It felt as if someone had just squeezed the life out of my heart. I blinked, trying to stay composed, but my throat tightened. "What did you just say?" "That room belonged to your father and me. It's where he took his final breath." Mark didn't even blink. His voice was cold, like he was making a business decision. "Mom, we have to be realistic. Dad's gone. What matters now is my work." Jennifer reached over and lightly touched my hand. It was brief, barely a brush, but cold as ice. Her voice was syrupy sweet, yet every word sliced like a razor. "Mother Helen, at your age, going up and down the stairs isn't really safe. I worry about you all the time. The downstairs room is so much more convenient, close to the kitchen and the bathroom. Or, do you not want Mark to have the best chance to succeed?" I sat frozen. She was forcing me to choose. If I refused, I'd be the selfish mother standing in the way of her son's success. Before I could respond, Mr. George suddenly slammed his hand on the table. The sound jolted everyone in the room. "Mark, you don't talk to your mother like that. This is her house." Mark turned to Mr. George, not even bothering to hide the condescension in his eyes. "This is a family matter, Mr. George. The kind of pressure a modern man like me faces is hard for you to understand. And Mom, if you can't give up the room for my wife and me, then maybe you should just move out." I had never seen Mark speak to an elder like that. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised on my own, through winters without heating, through sleepless nights and back-to-back shifts. But now, the way he looked at me held nothing but distance, maybe even a touch of resentment. I knew if I said anything, all I'd get back were cold, rational arguments, reasons about work, lectures about being realistic. so I put down my fork and knife. All right, I'll move. That night, I sat quietly in the small living room downstairs. The old, single bed creaked softly every time I moved. The cold air from the AC drifted down, raising goosebumps on my arms. Upstairs, footsteps echoed nonstop. The sounds of furniture being dragged, cabinet doors banging shut, each noise sharp and jarring. I knew what they were doing. They were clearing out my room, the space filled with a lifetime of memories between my husband and me, replacing it with their polished and trendy belongings. Everything was done quickly, decisively, like a quiet robbery in the dark. I sat there, listening to the sounds of something being taken from me, and slowly felt the warmth inside me fade. This room, the one Jennifer once called convenient and suitable for someone my age, had now become my temporary shelter in the very house I built. I gently clasped my hands together, trying to hold on to what little warmth remained from within. Upstairs, Jennifer's laughter rang out, bright and crisp, yet bitter enough to make me shut my eyes. "Mark, hang that abstract painting over here. This corner has a lovely view of the garden. Your mom's old wardrobe is really outdated. Let's get someone to install a new one tomorrow. Maybe something from IKEA." Mark's voice followed, cold and indifferent, like he was discussing a project. "Sure, whatever you like. Just move her old stuff to the side." I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. Every word drifted down clearly, each one pressing against my chest. I wondered when the boy who once kissed my hand before leaving for school became someone who could speak like that. Perhaps, in devoting my life to loving him, I had forgotten to teach him how to be grateful. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. But maybe I had no more tears left to shed. I bent down and pulled out the old wooden chest from under the bed. I had brought it with me when I was a young bride. It was where I kept the most precious things of my life. Carefully, I lifted the lid, my hands trembling as I brushed aside the fabric covering the top. Amid the worn mementos, I found a photo, faded with time. In the photo, Robert and I were standing on the beach at Big Sur. The ocean wind tossed my hair, and he had his arm around me, eyes shining like the day we first met. Behind us stood a small wooden cabin nestled in the pine trees, looking out over the sea. I remembered his warm voice clearly. "Helen, when we retire, I want to build a little house like this, somewhere we can hear the waves every day. We'll grow vegetables, keep bees, and live a peaceful life together." The woman in the photo was young and full of hope. I had smiled and replied to him. "I wish time would pass faster, Robert." That dream now lived only in this faded photograph I held in my hands. I stayed behind, kept going, raised our child, did everything I could so that Mark could have a better future. I sold pastries at the market, sewed clothes for others late at night, took on every job no matter how exhausting, just so my son would never have to go without. I thought happiness meant watching him succeed, own a house, have a wife and a child. But now I see I was wrong. I raised a man, but somewhere along the way, I lost my son. I held the photograph close to my chest, and more memories began to surface. I remembered the day Mark brought Jennifer home for the first time. He had said, "Mom, I have my own family now. You don't need to worry about me anymore." I smiled, thinking it was the voice of a grown man. But from that day on, something in his eyes changed. They were no longer warm or close. He looked at Jennifer with affection, but at me with distance. Then came the afternoon of the backyard barbecue. I placed some food on Mark's plate. Jennifer was standing nearby when she suddenly burst into tears. Her voice trembled, filled with hurt. "You only care about Mark. You never pay attention to me. Do you not accept me as part of the family?" Mark turned immediately, his face serious. He spoke without hesitation. "Mom, how could you make Jennifer feel this way? You should treat her more fairly." I stood there frozen, unable to understand what was happening. I had never said anything hurtful to Jennifer, yet in just a moment, I had become the one at fault. From that day on, I realized something. Every time Jennifer cried, Mark would turn his back on me. Each of her tears pulled another thread, tightening the distance between my son and me, and I could only watch, helpless, as the bond between mother and child was slowly, coldly severed, bit by bit. I gently set the photo down, my heart heavy. The sounds upstairs continued, but now I could no longer make out the words. All I could hear was the slow, tired rhythm of my own heartbeat. In that cold, quiet room, I knew that tonight I was losing more than just a bedroom. I was losing the son I had once loved more than life itself. The noise above didn't stop. The dragging of drawers, the steady footsteps, all of it seemed to press harder into the silence of the small room. Then suddenly, a strange calm began to rise in me. I placed the photograph down, reached for the phone on the table, and dialed a familiar number. After a few rings, Barbara's voice came through, cheerful and warm as always. "Hello? Is that you, Helen? It's late. You're still up?" I tried to hold back a sigh. "Barbara, I can't take this anymore." On the other end, her voice immediately turned serious. "What happened? Tell me everything." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "My son sent me down to the living room, so his wife could take over my master bedroom, the one that belonged to Robert." I heard Barbara gasp on the other end. Then her voice came, firm and full of anger. "What? That ungrateful boy. And that woman, she's unbelievable. Helen, listen to me. You don't have to endure this anymore. Walk away. I have a beautiful little cabin on the Oregon coast, just like the one you and Robert used to dream about. It's affordable too. Do you still have some savings?" I sat still. The words Oregon coast echoed in my mind like the sound of crashing waves. That dream, once spoken in Robert's voice, had seemed buried forever. A part of me wanted to nod yes right away. But then I thought of the money I had saved, the small figures I had carefully put away over the years, set aside for Mark if he ever needed it, for Emily when she went to college. I tightened my grip on the phone and said nothing. Barbara understood. She stayed silent. When the call ended, I sat there quietly, looking at the old chest at the foot of the bed. This time, I opened it without hesitation. From a small metal box, I took out my savings book and a folder of old investment documents. Each tiny figure handwritten on the pages marked a sleepless night, a season of struggle balancing work and home. I picked up the phone again and dialed. When Barbara answered, my voice was no longer shaking. "I have it. I'll come in the morning." The next morning, soft sunlight slipped through the curtains. I packed my things neatly into the old suitcase. A few changes of clothes, the photo of Robert, and my financial documents. As I stepped out of the room, a noise on the stairs made me look up. Mark and Jennifer were carrying a glass wardrobe upstairs. They both paused when they saw me with the suitcase. Jennifer looked at me, her lips curling slightly as she spoke, her voice light with a hint of mockery. "Oh, off so early, Mom? Running to the store to grab lunch for your two grateful children?" Mark didn't look up, still steadying the wardrobe as he spoke. "Get some ground beef too, would you? I've been craving your spaghetti with meat sauce." I looked at the two of them, and strangely, I felt calm. They thought I was going to the store. They thought my quiet obedience would never end. They had no idea this would be the last meal they'd ever expect from me. I didn't say a word. I simply smiled. Then I walked past them with my suitcase, each step slow but certain. I drove my old sedan out of the San Francisco suburbs on a cool, clear morning. With every mile that passed, the heaviness in my chest began to lift. No more scent of cold leftovers. No more clicking heels of Jennifer echoing across the floor. No more pretending in my son's eyes. Out here, I could finally breathe freely. When the car came to a stop in front of a narrow gravel path, I saw Barbara. She was waiting with a wide smile and that familiar wave. Behind her stood a small wooden sign with the name of the area written in soft, curved letters. The moment I saw the welcome in her eyes, I knew I had arrived in the right place. I stepped out of the car, pulling behind me a light suitcase that carried everything for this new life. Barbara walked up, took my hand, and led me along a pine-shaded path. And then, I stopped in my tracks. In front of me stood a charming little wooden cabin, like something that had stepped straight out of a dream. The roof was covered in dark wooden shingles, and a long front porch held 2 wooden swings facing the ocean. Beyond that was a stretch of golden sand shimmering under the morning sun, and waves gently lapped the shore like the lullaby of the earth itself. Barbara stood beside me, her face glowing with pride, as if she had just handed me a treasure. "Well, is it like the dream, Helen?" I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. A warmth rose from my chest to my eyes, and I could no longer hold back the tears. I shook my head slightly, and my voice came out soft, but filled with quiet joy. "Like the dream? No. It's even more beautiful than I ever imagined, Barbara. It's exactly like the house in the photo of me and Robert." Barbara placed a hand on my shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. Her voice softened, full of emotion. "Go on in. I'm sure Robert is smiling down from heaven right now." I stepped slowly into the house, my feet feeling as if they were floating. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, spreading across the honey-colored pine floors. A breeze from the ocean drifted in through the slightly open window, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the freshness of pine trees. I felt every cell in my body come alive. The house wasn't large, nor was it luxurious, but every detail radiated warmth and peace. And most importantly, this was my home. I turned to look at Barbara, my eyes no longer hesitant like the night before. My voice was clear and certain. "I'll take it, Barbara. Right now." Barbara laughed, a sound full of relief and joy. "I knew it. Don't worry. I'll handle all the paperwork with the agent within 48 hours. You can move in immediately." I didn't hesitate. I took out my savings book and handed over the folder of investment documents I had held onto my whole life. Through the home security camera, I had seen more than enough. The master bedroom I once cared for so meticulously had become the backdrop for Jennifer's show of extravagance. The walls that once displayed my wedding photo with Robert had been replaced with abstract art. Glossy silk sheets, a brand new massage chair placed by the window. Everything seemed designed to erase every trace of me. Mark leaned back, eyes half closed, soaking in the comfort of the chair. His legs were crossed lazily, his posture radiating self-satisfaction. Jennifer stood by the window, holding up her phone, snapping photo after photo from every angle. She adjusted every small detail, from the pillow to the coffee cup on the table, as if preparing a magazine shoot. Her voice rang out, full of pride. Finally, a private space with real style. "The view from this room is incredible, don't you think, Mark?" Mark nodded, his tone calculated. "Yeah, once this audit's done, I'll get promoted to vice president. Then we can remodel the whole house." The door opened gently. Emily stepped inside. She wore simple pajamas, her hair loosely tied back, and her face showed clear signs of worry. She hesitated near the doorway. "Dad, Mom, Grandma hasn't come back since this morning. I tried calling her, but she's not picking up." Jennifer turned her head, her hands still busy with her phone. She flicked her wrist slightly, brushing off her daughter's concern with a casual tone. "Oh, don't be dramatic. She's just sulking. She'll come back in a few days. It's not like she has anywhere else to go. This house is all she's ever had. She wouldn't dare leave it." Emily lowered her gaze. She didn't say another word. Quietly, she turned and walked out of the room that had once been the place where her grandmother told her bedtime stories every night. At that same moment, in the garden outside, Mr. George was rearranging a few rose pots. His hands were covered in soil, but his eyes remained fixed on the empty window of the downstairs room. A sense of unease swept over him. He set his hoe aside, wiped his hands, and walked into the house. "Mark, where's your mother? I haven't seen her out in the garden tending her roses all day." Mark didn't look up from his phone. He yawned lightly and replied, his voice calm, like he was commenting on the weather. "Don't worry, Mr. George. She's old. Gets moody sometimes. Give her a couple of days. She'll cool off and come home. She's got nowhere else to go anyway." At those words, Mr. George froze. His face darkened. He braced himself on the arm of a chair and stared at Mark without blinking. You ungrateful boy. Your mother raised you, gave you everything, and now you send her away and talk like that?" Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked off. His steps were steady, firm. His phone was already in his hand. Far away, I was sitting on the wooden swing on the porch. The sound of waves crashing gently against the rocks below drifted up, rhythmic and soothing. The afternoon sun slanted low, shining through the window and casting a golden hue over the wooden floor. I was sipping a cup of hot tea when the phone rang. I recognized Mr. George's number. "Helen, are you all right? Where are you? I'll drive out and bring you home." I smiled, my voice soft like wind passing through the pine trees. "George, don't worry. I'm fine. Truly, I'm fine." He sounded slightly surprised. "Fine? Where are you? I think I hear the ocean." I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the salty breeze. "I'm home, George. My real home, on the Oregon coast. It's beautiful here. When you have time, come down for a visit." He was quiet for a moment. His voice dropped, as if he were holding back emotion. "Is that so? So you're not coming back?" "No. I've already come home." I ended the call. Back there they might think I'm lost or alone. But here, I know I've finally found my place in the world. That morning, I woke early, just as I always did. On the wooden porch, I stood silently and looked out toward the ocean. Every morning here begins like this. No arguments, no dragging footsteps on old floorboards, no sharp, impatient voice from a faucet turned too tight. Just birdsong, the wind, and my own quiet heart. By the wooden fence, Mr. Thomas was setting up his easel. His gray knit cap sagged over his forehead, and his beard and hair were white like morning mist. He called out, "Good morning, Helen. The light over the bay is stunning today. Mind if I sit and paint from the corner of your garden?" I nodded, smiled, and poured him a hot cup of coffee. "Of course. Make yourself comfortable. Have some coffee to warm you up." He accepted the cup, set down his brush, and exhaled softly, as if offering thanks in a cloud of warm breath. Not 5 minutes later, I heard steady footsteps on the narrow path leading to the house. It was Mike and Sarah, the young couple who lived in the cabin at the far end. They often took morning walks to enjoy the fresh air before starting their remote work. Sarah paused at the steps, smiling as she inhaled the scent of freshly baked pastries. "Helen, your scones smell amazing. Ever since you shared the recipe, I've been trying, but I still can't get them to taste quite like yours." Mike walked beside her, laughing softly. "Your cabin feels so cozy this morning. This really is the American dream." I only smiled, saying nothing, but inside, I felt something strange and precious begin to rise. They called me by my name. They valued me for who I was. Not because I was someone's mother. Not because I had once been someone's wife. But because I was Helen. A woman who could bake, who could listen, and who knew how to live kindly. That afternoon, I opened the back door of the cabin and cleared a small space into an open-air area. I called it the Creative Workshop. A few young mothers from town brought their children over to learn how to make crafts. I taught them how to sew simple pillows and shape pottery from clay. I dug myself on the hillside behind the house. Little Lily, 8 years old, held out a cup, the glaze still wet. Her hands were covered in clay, her eyes shining. "Miss Helen, do you think my cup looks nice?" "I'm making it for my mom." I bent down to take a closer look and smiled, nodding. "You did a great job. Just a little more care and it will be perfect." A young mother named Maria, sitting nearby trimming fabric, looked up and spoke sincerely. "Thanks to your class, I can make meaningful gifts for my family. Have you ever thought about starting a cooking class too?" I earned a small income from these classes, but what I received in return couldn't be measured in money. It was the gratitude in their eyes. It was the way those mothers held their children again after once feeling helpless. It was the feeling of belonging to a community where I was no longer seen as a burden, the way I had been in that old house. While I lived with these simple and warm things back in San Francisco, my old house had started to unravel. Late afternoon. In the living room, Mark was reclining on the sofa, scrolling through news on his phone. Jennifer sat on the rug, painting her toenails, chewing gum. The television blared a loud game show in the background. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. A long, firm chime. Mark frowned, tossed his phone onto the table, and lazily got up to answer the door. Standing before him was a young couple. Both were neatly dressed, standing upright. The man held a folder in his hands. Mark scowled. "Can I help you?" The man smiled politely, his voice formal. "Good afternoon. My name is Ryan, and this is my wife. We are the new owners of this house. Per our agreement with Mrs. Helen, we're here to inform you that you have 30 days to vacate the property." Mark froze. The air inside the house grew thick. Jennifer heard the conversation and came running, her lip gloss still fresh and unfinished. "What? New owners? Are you crazy? This house belongs to my mother-in-law." Ryan's expression didn't change. He held out a thick folder, its cover embossed with official legal markings. "This is the property deed. The sale agreement was completed in the presence of a notary. Mrs. Helen sold the house to us last week." Jennifer's eyes widened, and Mark's face turned pale. They looked at each other, then back at the documents. Neither of them could speak. Mark snatched the folder from the young man's hands, his fingers gripping it so tightly the knuckles turned white. He flipped through the pages in a frenzy. His eyes scanned the signatures, the notary seal, the contract clauses. There was nothing to deny. Everything was legal, complete, and clear. He stood there, stunned. Then, as if something had closed around his throat, he burst out, his voice angry but laced with panic. "This can't be. She can't do this. This is my family's home." Ryan remained calm. He looked Mark straight in the eye, not with mockery, but with quiet firmness. His voice was steady and low. "Under California law, This property was Mrs. Helen's sole possession, inherited from her late husband. She has full authority over it. I suggest you stay calm and start looking for a new place to live." Mark staggered as if someone had struck him in the stomach. He stepped back, pressed his lips tightly together, then hurriedly pulled his phone from his pocket. His fingers trembled as he dialed the familiar number. An automated voice responded. "The number you have dialed is not reachable at the moment. Please try again later." He stared at the screen, then lifted his head, eyes wide, turning to Jennifer. "She blocked my number." Jennifer stood nearby. Her hands trembled, her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out for a few seconds. Then she stepped back, her voice cracking. "Then where are we supposed to live?" "She has lost her mind. She ruined everything we have. I was not there, but I saw the scene clearly through the camera." The next day, Mark drove to Ryan's law office in downtown San Francisco. He did not make an appointment. He pushed the door open forcefully, his eyes bloodshot. The office floor was wooden, and the light from the tall windows made the room feel cold and empty. Ryan was sitting behind his desk, typing something on his computer. He looked up when he heard the door open, his expression just as calm as the day before. Mark did not greet him. He pointed straight at Ryan's face, his voice tight and clipped. "I am warning you. Cancel that contract right now. If you don't, you will regret it." Ryan straightened his posture and gently closed his laptop. His voice was not loud, but it was clear and icy. "Mr. Mark, I understand that you are upset, but threatening an attorney is not a wise strategy. All documents are transparent. Mrs. Helen sold the house. I bought it. You have no legal grounds to challenge this. If you continue to cause trouble, I will have no choice but to file for a restraining order." With that, he slowly pulled open a drawer and took out a stack of documents. He placed each one neatly on the desk. The new property deed, the bank transfer receipt, the signed sales contract, and the witness statement from Barbara confirming the transaction. I wasn't there. But that evening, Barbara told me everything. She was sipping wine, raising an eyebrow as she recounted it with a tone of wicked satisfaction. "Helen, your son stood there like a statue. His face was pale as paper. He couldn't say a word. That usual arrogance, that smug confidence he always carried, it was gone. Completely gone. He looked drained, as if every bit of life had been pulled out of him. When the lawyer and I exchanged glances, we both understood in the same moment that he had lost completely. I listened and smiled gently, not out of joy, but because justice had finally spoken. And at last, I no longer had to fight back with tears. I had used the law to defend my worth. And this time, I had won, with dignity. The studio apartment on the worst block of Oakland didn't have a real window. Just a tiny, grimy pane of glass that let in neither breeze nor proper light. Their belongings were still packed in unopened cardboard boxes, stacked in corners. Every step through the space required dodging something out of place. On the floor, a small old fan spun weakly, creaking with every turn like a tired complaint. Mark walked in, looking utterly worn out. His shirt was wrinkled, tie half removed, sweat soaking the back of his collar. He dropped his briefcase onto the chair and let out a long sigh. But before he could sit down, Jennifer's voice called out from across the room. She was lying with her legs crossed on the mattress, eyes glued to her phone, speaking in a flat, practiced tone of someone who had long since lost her patience. "Late again. We're still short on rent this month. Did you really think moving into this rat cage was some kind of upgrade?" Mark clenched his jaw, turned abruptly, and slammed his keys down onto the table. His voice broke out, loud and furious. "Shut up! Do you even know how people look at me at work now? I'm the guy who kicked his own mother out. My career is ruined." Jennifer shot up, tossed her phone onto the chair, and pointed directly at him. "Oh, please, don't blame me. If you hadn't thrown your mother out, we wouldn't be in this mess. I thought you were a strong man. Turns out, you let some old lady play you like a fool and take everything." Mark staggered back a step. He stared at her, then moved forward, his voice thick with rage. "You dared to call my mother a dying old woman? This is all your fault. You've always wanted more, always asking for this and that." Jennifer laughed, a dry, bitter sound, laced with contempt. "Fine. Then let's go our separate ways. I'm not staying poor with a failure. Divorce? I wasn't there to witness it, but Mr. George told me later." In his eyes, it was disappointment more than anger. My son, the one who once called himself the pillar of the family, was now being called a failure by the very woman he had once spoiled. It was a moment of karma, complete and undeniable, without the need for explanation. A few days later, Mark called Mr. George and asked to meet at an old Starbucks downtown. They sat at the back table by the window, though neither of them looked outside. Mark kept his head down, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His eyes were sunken, his hair unkempt, stubble covering his jaw. The cheap jacket he wore did nothing to hide the shape of a man who had fallen hard. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse and broken, like the last remnants of his pride were being dragged out with each word. "Mr. George, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But I'm in a bad place now. Jennifer wants a divorce. I'm about to lose my job. Please, you have to help me." Mr. George looked him in the eye. His gaze wasn't entirely cold, but it no longer held the gentleness it once did. He let out a heavy breath. "How am I supposed to help you? The house is gone. The money is gone. The only thing left is to find your mother." Mark looked up. A flicker of hope flashed across his eyes like a drowning man spotting a piece of driftwood. "Yes. Please take me to her. You know where she is? I'll apologize. I'll tell her I'm sorry." Mr. George didn't respond right away. Later, he told me that at that moment, he looked Mark straight in the eyes. The words sounded regretful, but in that gaze, there was something else. It wasn't sorrow for having hurt his mother. It was regret for what he had lost. He wanted to say sorry, but only to get something back, not to make it right. That afternoon, I was sitting on the porch with Mr. Thomas the painter, and the couple Mike and Sarah. I was wearing a bright blue maxi dress, something I never had the courage to wear before, because Jennifer once mocked it as old-fashioned. We laughed together and sipped herbal tea. On the table sat a plate of cookies I had baked myself, rich with the scent of butter and almonds. Mr. George brought Mark to me. I saw him from afar. Walking beside him was a tall, thin man, head bowed low, his steps heavy. I recognized him instantly. That was my son. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt. His clothes were wrinkled, the collar old and slightly uneven. I sat up straight but did not stand to greet him. I held a polite smile, nothing more. A small ache passed through my chest, but then the memory of that fateful dinner extinguished any trace of softness. Mark froze when he saw me. His eyes scanned the cabin, the friends laughing and talking beside me, the sunlit space filled with sea breeze and warmth. His face showed surprise, then confusion, then envy. I saw it clearly. He had expected to see a weary, lonely, regretful old woman. But he was wrong. He saw a woman glowing with life, free, loved, respected, and no longer needing him. And in that moment, he truly understood what loss meant. Not the loss of property, but the loss of a mother who had once given him everything. A mother he had pushed away with his own hands. After a long pause, Mark suddenly stepped forward. He walked straight ahead, passing Mr. George, ignoring the presence of Mr. Thomas, and the couple Mike and Sarah sitting quietly beside me. He stopped right in front of me. His eyes were bloodshot, though I couldn't tell if it was from exhaustion or emotion. His voice came out hoarse and strained, filled with frustration. But in every word he spoke, I felt no real remorse. "Mom, I'm glad to see you're doing okay. But can't you see how much I'm suffering?" I didn't respond right away. I looked him straight in the face, calm and unflinching. "I see it." He nodded quickly, as if a door had just opened. His voice lowered, carrying a hint of pleading, though it still could not hide that familiar tone of expectation. "Then you have to help me. Sell this cabin. It's worth a decent amount. We can buy another place. I promise I'll live with you, take care of you. I was wrong. Please forgive me." As soon as the words left his mouth, the air seemed to freeze. Everyone around us fell silent. Mr. George gently shook his head. He turned away, unable to hide the disappointment on his face. Thomas rested his sketchbook on his knee. His hand, still holding the pencil, paused in place, though his gaze remained fixed on Mark with quiet disapproval. Mike and Sarah exchanged a glance. They held each other's hands more tightly. They said nothing, but in their eyes was a clear discomfort, a silent defense on my behalf. I heard every word he said. I heard the way he used them. "You have to help me. Sell this cabin." It wasn't a request. It wasn't about sharing. It was a demand. A familiar sense of entitlement, assuming I would sacrifice again, like I always had. A feeling began to spread inside me, sharp and cold. But I didn't tremble. Instead, I saw more clearly than ever the truth I had avoided for so long. He had never truly seen me as a person, with feelings, with a right to choose. In his eyes, I was always a quiet shadow, an endless ATM, a place to return to whenever he failed. I looked at my son, without anger, without tears, without blame, only the silence of someone fully awake. And in my eyes, though sad, there was not the slightest trace of hesitation. He hesitated, perhaps because he wasn't used to seeing me like this, a mother no longer bowing her head, no longer softening her voice to mend things. A mother now sitting upright, hands resting on the tea table, surrounded by friends who understood and valued her. Mr. George slowly stepped back, folding his arms. His eyes made it clear that this was a conversation only I had the right to speak in. Thomas picked up his pencil again, but he didn't draw. He looked at me, as if to say I was not alone. Mike gave a subtle nod, and Sarah kept her hand tightly clasped in his, her gaze fixed on me. I looked straight at my son, the one who had once been my greatest pride. "Mark, you said you were wrong, and I believe you feel that way. But then you said, I have to help you." I paused. I let those words settle into the silence. "I don't have to do anything, Mark." He lifted his head. His face twitched slightly. Surprise and offense flickered across his expression. Perhaps it was the first time in his life he had ever heard me say such words. A sentence that was not loud, but carried more weight than any rejection. My voice remained calm. "A mother's love is unconditional. I will always love you, but respect is not. And you lost it the night you thought you had the right to force me out of a room filled with the memories of my life." Mark squinted. His lips trembled. Then, suddenly, he shouted like a child pushed into a corner. "But Mom, you've seen how I'm living. I have no home. My wife is leaving me. My career is gone. Don't you feel sorry for me?" I stayed where I was. I simply shook my head. There was pain in my chest, but my eyes no longer wavered. I do feel sorry for you. But I also feel sorry for myself. I turned around and pointed toward the small wooden house behind me. The door was still open. The little garden was still in full bloom. The ocean in the distance still shimmered under the afternoon light. This cabin was your father's and my dream. It is the last living piece of your father's spirit. And I am not going to give up my dream. I won't sell away my happiness just to save you from your own selfishness. You are old enough to stand on your own feet, even if those steps are shaky and hard. Mark collapsed. His knees gave out right there on the porch. He covered his face with both hands. His shoulders trembled with every breath. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but I couldn't tell whether they were tears of remorse or simply disappointment at not getting what he wanted. He sobbed. "So you're leaving me? You don't need me anymore?" I stepped closer, but I stopped a few feet away. The distance wasn't far, yet it marked a boundary I no longer wished to cross. "I'm not leaving you. I'm simply no longer rescuing you from the consequences of your own choices." Mark, listen to me. When the day comes that you truly feel remorse, not because you need money, not because you're afraid of losing your job, but because you finally understand how deeply your mother's heart has been hurt and broken, then the door to my home will still be open for you, as a guest. Mark lowered his head. He said nothing more. I turned to Mr. George, and in that moment, I remembered Emily. I spoke slowly, directing my words toward Mark as one final offering of comfort. As for Emily, tell her grandmother always remembers her, anytime she wants, whether it's for a day or for the whole summer. This door will always be open to her. There will always be a bedroom here for her. When I finished speaking, I felt part of the weight in my chest lift, because I knew my granddaughter had done nothing wrong. I had to be clear. The mistakes of the parents should never be placed on the shoulders of a child. And I believed Emily was a sensitive child. She had been saddened when she saw me pushed down to the ground floor. Mark stood up. His back was hunched. His eyes were red. He had nothing left to say. He turned away and staggered back toward the old rental car parked at the gate. He said no goodbye, not even a glance back. I stood still, watching. Mr. George stepped beside me. He let out a quiet sigh. "You did the right thing, Helen. Sometimes, the toughest love is the truest kind of love." I didn't reply. I simply watched the car disappear behind the line of pine trees. The heart of a mother twisted inside me. But I knew this pain was necessary. Necessary for him. And necessary for me. Only through this would he truly have a chance to grow. As for me, I had completed the final and hardest duty of a mother. To love without overindulging, to forgive without giving in too easily. That afternoon, Mr. George stopped by again. I had already prepared 2 cups of herbal tea and placed them on the small wooden table on the porch overlooking the sea. He sat down in the armchair and sighed as soon as he settled in. He looked at me and shook his head like someone carrying bad news. "Helen, I had some business over in Oakland yesterday. I passed by the place where Mark is staying." I paused from bundling some dried herbs, my eyes resting on his face. He didn't rush to continue, but I could sense the heaviness in his heart. I heard him and Jennifer arguing loudly. The neighbors were whispering all around. My heart tightened. Even though I had drawn the line, even though I had learned to be silent to protect myself, the heart of a mother can never go entirely numb. But I also understood. This was the path he had chosen, and now it was his to walk. Mr. George went on, his voice lower. He said not a single financial firm will trust him anymore. People are calling him the man who threw his own mother out. That rising star reputation of his has completely vanished. He paused, then added slowly. And Jennifer screamed. She said it was all Mark's fault, that it was because he threw you out. Then he started crying, Helen. He said, I know I was wrong, but it's all too late now. I said nothing. I simply looked out toward the sea. The gentle waves rolled in as if touching memories that had yet to fade. For the first time, I heard him truly admit his mistakes. Not out of anger, not as a plea, but from a place of complete despair. Perhaps, at last, the seed of remorse had begun to sprout from the very mud he had made. A week later, I received a call from Emily. Her voice was soft, as if afraid that what she said might make me sad. Grandma, my dad has been different lately, I asked gently. Tell me, sweetheart. Last night I saw him sitting alone in his room. He was looking through the old photo album of you and Grandpa Robert. He cried. He whispered, Dad, what have I done to Mom? She paused for a moment, then went on. He also told me, Emily, promise me you'll always be good to your grandma. I hung up, my hand still trembling slightly. He had opened the old album again. He had remembered Robert. He had finally asked himself the question he should have asked long ago. It was no longer regret over lost money or a ruined name. It was the beginning of understanding what it means to be a son. Perhaps now, it was time for me to see him again. Not to forgive, but to hear, for the first time, the things he had never had the courage to say out loud. That afternoon, a light drizzle fell over Oregon. Fine drops of water, soft as thread, landed quietly on the wooden windowsill. I was sitting on the floor, arranging bundles of dried lavender and ribbons for the craft class the next morning, when suddenly, I heard quiet footsteps on the porch. I looked up. A figure stood there. Mark stepped into the light of the porch. He looked at me, and in his eyes, there was no pride, no calculation, only emptiness and torment. His voice trembled. Mom, I didn't come to ask for money. I don't even dare to ask for your forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you, once, that I truly understand now. I know I was wrong. He lowered his head. His hands were clenched tightly together. I went through all the photos of you and Dad, and I finally understood. That day, when I said those cruel words, how much pain I caused you. I'm truly sorry, Mom. I stood still, saying nothing. Inside me, a warmth began to rise. This apology carried no hidden agenda. I stepped gently toward him and spoke softly. I heard what you said, and I believe this time it's real. I'm glad that you finally understand. I paused and looked directly at the worn face in front of me. A man's maturity is not measured by how much money he earns. It's measured by whether he has the courage to admit his mistakes and face them. I turned to look out at the sea. The waves continued their steady rhythm. The salty wind brushed through my hair. But as you can see, my life is different now, and so is yours. I can't, and I no longer want to return to being the kind of mother who only sacrifices and suffers in silence. You must stand on your own feet. That is how you truly grow. And that is how you begin to make things right. I invited him in. I handed him a dry cotton towel. I poured a cup of hot coffee and placed it in front of him. We sat and talked. Not as mother and child as we once were, but as two adults with a shared past and wounds we had once caused each other. But now, what remained was healing and understanding. When he left, I walked him to the gate. No hugs, no hands held. But my heart felt lighter. I knew this would be the last time he came to me as a child who only knew how to ask. If there was a next time, he would be someone different. And I had fulfilled the final and most difficult mission of a mother. To teach her child the most important lesson of all, one rooted in dignity and character, even if it meant accepting distance as the cost. 6 months later, summer arrived. My cabin had been renovated in parts. A small wooden studio had been built along the side. I called it Helen's Creative Corner. In the mornings, I ran a small class for mothers in the area and their children to learn crafts together. Some days we worked with clay. Other days we sewed pillows. Sometimes we simply painted on smooth river stones. In the afternoons, I made jams with a few friends. Strawberry, orange, apple, lavender. Each fragrant batch was poured into little glass jars, labeled by hand. I created a small website and began taking orders from nearby towns. The customers were kind. Everyone said the products felt soulful and full of care. One day, after finishing a ceramic vase, Maria washed her hands and turned to me with a bright smile. "Miss Helen, thanks to your creative studio, we found joy and a way to connect with one another. It's such a beautiful thing." A customer from Portland sent me a message. "Mrs. Helen, your jam is incredible. I'd like to order 5 more jars." I read the message and smiled. There was no sadness in my heart. No ache, no regret. I was no longer the grieving widow defined by Mark's shadow. I was Helen, the potter, the jam maker, a vibrant, cherished part of this little community. I had found my worth, a kind of worth that didn't depend on anyone else, a value that was not tied to any title or role. I simply want to say this. Being a mother is a long journey of sacrifice, but also one of awakening. Sometimes we must step back, not because we have stopped loving, but because the one we love needs space to grow up. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means choosing not to be held hostage by the pain anymore. And sometimes, in order to truly live, we must know how to place a full stop at the end of one chapter, so we can begin writing the next one as our own. If this story touched something in your heart or reminded you of something personal, feel free to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Click like if you believe it was worth your time, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Diary to follow more stories that reach into the deepest corners of the soul. Thank you for staying until the very end.